What's up, everybody? I am Brett L. Pape. That's my boy, Coach Bruce, right there. And this is the 2023 NFL The Coach Approach mock draft. Coach, I don't know about you, but of all the seasons, draft season is definitely my favorite when it comes to the NFL. I mean, we have a big party here at the house. I probably have more people come over for the draft than I do for Super Bowl over the years. So we're really excited. Can't wait to just kind of sit back, enjoy the whole experience, and have a few beers at the same time. How about you, Coach? What are you going to do tomorrow night?
Hey, there's nothing like it. So I'm gonna be going out with there's my niece's husband and his brother. We become pretty tight. They're gonna go out with a bunch of people they have in a fantasy football league. I'm not in that league with them, but we're gonna go out. So 10, 11, 12 of us and have a good time watching the NFL draft. I tell you what, man, it is for me being a fantasy football guy and just a big football guy, ex-coach like you. I don't know, outside of the Super Bowl, the NFL draft is the biggest event to me all year long. It's an absolute blast. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, just the drama, just
Yeah.
watching guys that I mean, you and I are both fortunate. We got two big guys getting drafted today that we saw play in high school.
Yeah.
Me, that would be Bryce Young, you, Bijan Robinson. I mean, they're going to have heck, there's two of the top players in the entire draft. One's going number one. And if the NFL cared about running backs, the other one would probably go number two. But we'll get into that portion of it later.
Yes, we will.
But yeah, it's just such a cool experience. And the great part about the draft too is that there's always hope. This is a night full of hope. All 32 teams, unless you're the Miami Dolphins or a few other teams that traded away their first rounders, you're going to go away at the end of the night thinking you're a better place than you were. And this is the only time of the year that happens. So totally excited. Can't wait. Can't wait to watch and looking forward to getting into our mock draft. But before we do, let's get into a couple landing spots of guys that you would be excited. Yeah. Who are a couple guys that you would like to see? Let's start offensively. Who are you curious to see where he's going to go? And maybe what's your favorite landing spot for him if you got to choose that?
Well, so first we talked about Bijan Robinson, so I'll start there. And I was fortunate enough to see him through his high school career and obviously followed him at Texas. But Bijan Robinson, and look, I think it's the best landing spot for him, which is the worst landing spot for me as a Cowboy fan. To me, it would be in Philly. I think what separates San Francisco and Philly right now is what they have in their backfield. I think Miles Sanders is going to be years he had last year. You had a Bijan Robinson behind that offensive line, what you can do in the red zone with Jalen Hurts and what they've got, receiver and tight end with Dallas Goedert. And I think you can, you've got another pick at 30, so you can come back and pick up a defensive guy there. So I'd love to see Bijan Robinson land in Philly. The other guy for me there's two more is Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm super high on Jahmyr Gibbs. I know you are too. We'll get into that a little bit, but I'd love to see him land with the Chargers, to be honest with you. I think if Austin Eckler's on his way out, I think that's a great landing spot. Herbert, they've proven there. They certainly like to get the running back involved. Eckler, a lot of people thought he didn't have the size to be a red zone guy. Look at the touchdown production he's had over the last couple of years. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs gives you some of that. And then the other guy is Zay Flowers, who I'm real high on two. And I go back and forth between him being my wide receiver 2 or 3, but I think right now I've got him penciled as my wide receiver 2. I just think he's very dynamic. The Chargers, I think, are a great landing spot for him too. But if I picked the perfect landing spot, it would be probably for me in Kansas City or in Dallas, just being a guy. But that's not really what I think is the best landing spot. But I think if you get Kansas City with what they've done with Tyreek Hill at his size and his speed, Zay Flowers doesn't have the build that he does, especially on the lower half. But he can run physical. He can take the top off. He can give you yards after catch. So I think that landing spot would be absolutely dynamic for him, man. What do you think?
He's pretty special. He's a guy that he's another guy that I'd really like to see where he's going to end up. And, a lot of people are comparing him to Antonio Brown. I think if you look at the first 6 or 7 years of AB's career, it was as good as anybody else's. So I think that might be a little bit high for him. But at the same time, he's definitely a playmaker. He's where the NFL, I don't know if it's by choice or if it's by, that's just all that's out there this year. But those smaller receivers that can play physical and can do things out in the open field, they're becoming, you look at this whole draft, that's what this whole draft is at the receiver spot. So really excited about Zay Flowers.
It's a passing league. It's a passing league. Yeah.
And we'll get into how the changes in the NFL has changed a lot of things, and it's
Yeah.
changed how we view quarterbacks in the NFL now. But on the defensive side, I'll tell you, before all the talk about the issues that Jalen Carter had, whether it be driving his car or whatever it may be, he was widely considered the number one player in this draft. And I'm really curious to see, is he going to have a Warren Sapp like drop where Warren dropped, I think, pick 12 to Tampa Bay?
Yeah.
But the point is who's ever going to get Jalen Carter, if he's got no issues here forth, he's going to be special. And if a team like Detroit or Seattle or Chicago, can you imagine if he slides all the way down to 9? I don't think he will, but if he slides down to 9 to Chicago, prior to making the deal with Carolina, Chicago was sitting at 1, and everyone pretty much assumed when he was there, they were going to take Jalen Carter. Now they got this massive haul, and they could possibly get him at 9. So I'm really looking forward to just kind of watching what ends up happening with him.
No, he's an interesting one. You can go back to Laramie Tunsil and what happened with the weed mask and that deal. You can talk about other players that right up until the draft incidents that happened that may have affected their draft stock. Randy Moss is a prime example of that, and we saw his career turned out. I think at the end of the day, you look at the film, you talk to the coaches, you talk to the people around this kid, find out about his work ethic, find out about what kind of character he has, what does he like in practice, what's he like as a teammate. And I think all of those reports that you're getting tell you that I think that, and I won't want to spoil it where we're going to take him in the draft, but Jalen Carter's talent it's unquestionable. I mean, you watch the film, you watch the games he played in, he's a special player. So I think it's going to be tough for some teams to pass on a guy with that kind of talent.
Yeah. I was reading or hearing, we listened between you and I think we listened to every podcast and read as much content as anybody. And one of the things that is scary is that Howie Roseman is doing, it sounds like he's trying to find a way to move up some spots so he can throw him in there with his other Georgia teammates from last year. And I mean, can you imagine the rich getting richer if he lands in Philadelphia? I'm sure you'd love it.
Howie Roseman, you feel like he should get executive of the year, it seems like, for the last couple of years. And what he's done in building that roster from inside out and putting talent together, acquiring A.J. Brown last year in the draft. As a Cowboys fan, you hate the Eagles, but at the same time, I have so much respect for what they've done as a franchise and how they've built that roster that, I couldn't imagine, him landing there. So, and then the other one I think that we touched on right before we get in the draft is the corner position. Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. Who's the CB1? Who do you like? One guy's, a taller guy, but he's not the guy that's the more physical guy. He's a technician. He's great with his footwork. Then you get Devin Witherspoon, who's not afraid to mix it up in the run game, but he's a smaller guy. He plays like he's Christian Gonzalez's size, and then vice versa. So I'm interested to see how those guys go in the draft as well. I think they'll both go in the top 10.
Well, we'll find out. We know where they're going to go with ours, and we'll go ahead and reveal ours here in a few minutes.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about how this whole process started. We put on a show during the season. We kind of kicked back into show mode in late July, early August. But we really wanted to get on here because we both love the draft. And as much as we possibly can, we'll get more podcasts going throughout the season before the kickoff of the season actually starts in September. But the draft is the best. And we talked about how neither one of us would call ourselves analysts. We're fans of the game who consume a lot of content. And so that is where we're going to base our decisions on how we make our picks. You took all the odd picks, so you're going to get pick 1. And I've got all the even picks. So why don't you kick it off? Pick 1, Carolina Panthers.
Well, talk real quick, too. We're all trading picks, but there's no trades. So I know there's a lot of trade hype, and it's too difficult to predict that. So we're going to go no trades. We're going to do a mixture of team fits, what we think makes sense, and also best player available, where we think it makes sense to go that direction. So the first pick, obviously now that it's Carolina, it's a little bit easier to predict how this is going to play out. There's a lot of talk about recently, the guy posted on Reddit, I guess, that Will Levis was going to be the number 1 overall pick, and Twitter went crazy. Vegas went crazy with the odds. We went CJ Stroud there. But at the end of the day, it's Bryce Young for me. I mean, the guy, on film, he pops. He's got a calm demeanor. Nothing rattles that guy. He's big in big moments. So I think at this point, hey, you can look at the numbers. I think it was since 2004, I think it was. We were talking about this earlier. You haven't had a quarterback under 207 pounds go in the first round. The NFL has changed. The passing rules have changed. It's all about protecting your quarterback. I think at this point for Carolina, you moved up to get your guy, and I think Bryce Young is the guy that you take in that spot. So I'm going Bryce Young with the first pick quarterback at Alabama.
What does this move do for Carolina? Because I think some of the concerns, we talk about the size, and we're not going to get much into that, but the character of the kid, coming from Santa Ana's modern day high school, all you've ever heard about is just how great of a kid he is in the locker room and this and that. I think it's a great move for them. I think it was the only selection for them to make. And I'm really excited about what this can do for that franchise.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, I just go back and, he's clutch. You can go back and look at the stats, and there's a lot of analytics you can go back and look at. You can talk about film guys, which I'm a big film guy, but there's something special about him. You look at Alabama quarterbacks that come out of that program. Jalen Hurts, yeah, he went to Oklahoma, but look what he's doing in the NFL. Look at Tua Tagovailoa before the concussions came into play. They're starting to put some quarterbacks in the NFL that can play some football. They run a pro-style offense. He has to do full field reads. For those that don't understand what that is, you're not running mirror routes, so it's not a slant and a flat on both sides where you pick one side pre-snap and that's where you go with the football. It's full field reads. We're looking at what the defense is doing pre-snap and post-snap, and his ability to process that information and throw on time has been really remarkable. And yeah, he's got some times where he's a little bit short to the boundary, but I just love his demeanor. I love his character. I love what he is and what he's about. So I'm excited to see what Bryce Young does in Carolina.
All right. Hey, let's move on to pick 2, and that is me. And with the Houston Texans, this pick has been talked about. A lot of people feel like the whole draft is going to be dependent on this pick because if they go one way, it's going to change a lot of things that could happen. And if they go the other way, everyone pretty much expected them to do so. But I'm going to think they're going to go the way that most people don't think they're going to do, and most people don't think they should do. Pick 2, Houston Texans select Tyree Wilson, defensive end out of Texas Tech. Coach, when you talk about ceiling, this is a guy who's got a huge ceiling. His motor, his ability to use his size and his wingspan. I mean, he is a prototypical edge rusher for the next 10 to 12 years if he's who everyone thinks he can develop into.
I think you hit it on the head. I mean, he pops. We talk about popping on film, meaning the guy just continues to make plays and be disruptive. He's got the biggest upside. I still think Will Anderson is a safer play. And I think for Houston, look, you can take an opportunity. You got 2 picks in the first round. You're rebuilding. You get DeMeco Ryans. He fits, the type of personality that DeMeco's looking for in that defense. And he does have the higher ceiling than Will Anderson, I think, if he can play to his potential. So I have no issues with this pick whatsoever. I think it's fun and it's exciting. And look, if they go defense with the first pick and don't take C.J. Stroud or Will Levis, whatever quarterback you think should be QB2, it changes the board. It changes the board completely. There's going to be more movement after that for teams that might want to trade up if they think that, Will Levis or C.J. Stroud or Anthony Richardson are their guy. So it makes the draft a little bit more interesting. And I know you and I went back and forth on this. When you first made this pick, I'm like, man, how do you not go Will Anderson? But I get it. I get the upside.
Well, let's move on to pick 3. And this is another team that, we've already talked about it. We think the Arizona Cardinals in the perfect situation. They're going to be able to trade back at least once, if not trade back. They've got a lot. You talk to you listen to anybody, Daniel Jeremiah says it over and over again. Worst roster in the NFL. So, but we have no trade. So if they're here, who are they taking?
Well, this is where I think you go again. We both agree. You're going to trade back. And if you can trade back again, you trade back again. You're looking to get as much value and as many picks as you can, almost like you would do in Dynasty League football, right? But I think you go Will Anderson here. He's a safe play. He's an edge rusher that's 6'3", 250. He's got good arm length. He's great in the run game. He's great. He's disruptive. So I'm excited to see what they can do. And I think you have to, if you're going to stay at 3 and you can't find the value that you want, you take what is the safest pick in this situation. You can't afford to be wrong. You take Will Anderson and you move on and you live with the consequences.
Will Anderson, that's not this guy. I find it weird that over the last week or two, that guy has been kind of like, it's now they're finding reasons not to like him. But if you just watch his high, and he's such a great defender against the run as well.
Yeah.
I love the guy. I'm surprised that I would pick him over Tyree Wilson myself. I would take what we know over what we hope every day of the week.
And look, you do see times. I mean, you hate to see it on film, but there are times where he feels like the play is over, and you kind of see that motor stop for a second. So I think there's some things there that he can clean up. But look, at the NFL level, I mean that stuff's going to show up. And I'm sure that's been coached up where he's coming from at Alabama too. But I think he's the best and the safest pick right here if you have to stay at 3.
Pick 4, moving on. Now we get to the Indianapolis Colts. And we know, I mean, this looks like it should be an easy selection for them because most people have always talked about quarterback 2. We know they're going with quarterback. We know they are tired of going to the 38-year-old quarterback like Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers or the young kid that didn't pan out, Carson Wentz. And now they want to see if they can develop their own guy. Pick 4, Indianapolis Colts select Will Levis out of Kentucky. We can talk about if he's better than Stroud or not, but we talk about reading the tea leaves, and everything we're hearing over the last 3 or 4 days is that Will Levis is their guy. And I wonder if they fell in love with Will Levis because they thought a CJ Stroud was never going to be there. And so they've done all their time and all their homework on Will Levis. I don't know what it may be, but whatever the reason, and you read today that supposedly the Manning brothers have given their approval that he is worthy of the 4th overall pick in the draft. Whatever it may be, whatever the reason, it seems like this is where they're going to go. What are your thoughts on Will Levis?
Well, I can tell you this. It's not Gardner Minshew. It's not going to be Sam Ehlinger, and it's not going to be Nick Foles. Those are the 3 quarterbacks they've got on the roster right now. I think we're safe to say that's not the direction they're going to go. But I think Will Levis, in this situation, he's going to be the guy. Like you said, to your point, that's what the reports are telling you. You can make the argument certainly for C.J. Stroud. I'm a C.J. Stroud over Will Levis guy. I'm an Anthony Richardson over Will Levis guy. But this seems to be where the Colts are going to go. So unless they're going to trade up or there's some sort of trade action that happens, I think this is where they're going to go. And look, all the intangibles there. If you look at his 2021 film, you can see what everybody gets excited about. When you look at his 2022 film, he didn't have a lot of talent around him. He's playing with a couple nagging injuries. It wasn't great, but look, there's enough potential there to say, hey, there's plenty of quarterbacks you can give examples of that struggle with accuracy, and they have found a way in the NFL to be productive. So I think if that's your guy, that's where you got to go. You've got to get a quarterback over there after the Matt Ryan and what they've tried to do with Carson Wentz. I think you have to find your future quarterback. So Will Levis makes the most sense here.
All right, let's move on to pick 5, Seattle Seahawks. This is your selection, Coach.
So I went, and this was a no-brainer. If Jalen Carter is going to drop to 5, I'm taking Jalen Carter. We talked about this when we were talking about who the first or second guy was. We talked about the issues off the field that occurred. I think if you've done your homework like the NFL scouts have done, you can't. He gives you the best D tackle in this draft and arguably the best defensive player. He adds to a defense that already has Bobby Wagner, Jamal Adams, Tariq Woolen, who was a steal last year in the draft. I think what they did with Geno Smith and letting Russell Wilson go and making that deal, Seattle Seahawks are not in rebuild mode. They want to win the NFC West and they want to compete for a Super Bowl. So you take the best player on the board that makes the biggest difference to what you can do defensively, and that's Jalen Carter.
I mean, if you are in Seattle and you're in that, I can't imagine what that war room is going to feel like for that whole entire staff. Pete Carroll is just going to be enthusiastic as hell about having this guy be able to fall to him. Nobody could imagine that they were going to have the season they had last year, nor could anyone imagine that Denver was going to have the season that they had, which gives them the opportunity, them being Seattle, to select a pick 5. Yeah. So Jalen Carter that is a dream scenario for if you're a Seahawks fan.
Yeah, 100%.
Pick 6, another team that has benefited from a trade that gives them a pretty high pick, and that's Detroit Lions. And Detroit Lions have done a great job coming off of the Matthew Stafford trade. First and foremost, they have not had to use – a lot of people thought when they saw the draft capital they got back from trading Stafford that they were going to have to use one of those for a quarterback. Here they are now in draft number 3, and they're still probably not going to take a quarterback, at least not in the first round. And they're going to build up that defense some more by selecting Illinois quarterback Devin Witherspoon. You brought it up. You brought it up earlier in the show when you talked about how physical he is for a little guy. The guy's a scrapper. I mean, he is going to be. I think he's perfect for the Aaron Glenn defense, and I think the Detroit Lions, much like Seattle, has got to be very happy. I think Detroit would be more happy or happier if they're looking at Jalen Carter, but I don't think they're going to be too disappointed about getting Devin Witherspoon.
No, he's a technician. He's extremely good. He's talented. He's not afraid to mix it up in the run game. Gave up a 34.9% completion rate last year per PFF. I mean, the guy is an absolute. I love him. I think he's the best corner on film. I think Christian Gonzalez, as good as he is, from a technicality standpoint, as an off-ball corner, he's not was willing to mix it up in the run game. But Devin Witherspoon is that dude. When you watch the film, you're like, that's the dude we want to set that can set the edge. It can also play in coverage. So I love Devin Witherspoon here.
All right, pick 7. You are on the clock as the Las Vegas Raiders general manager. Who do you like here, Coach?
So this is tough. There's a lot of directions that the Raiders can go, and I think at this point, we talked about this earlier before we started the actual draft, but I think you take Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. You've got Max Crosby. You didn't get the production from Chandler Jones last year that you wanted, but I think you're okay up front. I think for the Raiders in the AFC West, where you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Justin Herbert, you have the quarterback play and the passing games that you can see in the schemes that these teams use. You've got to have a corner that can make a difference. You've got to have someone in coverage that can actually shut somebody down and force that quarterback to take a little bit more time in the pocket. So I think you have to go corner here, and Christian Gonzalez to me is the guy.
I love the pick. You talk about a team that's got needs. This team has a lot of needs, and everywhere on the field. So, but when you can get a guy on the backside of your defense that kind of locked down for the next 7 to 10 years, you got to take the opportunity to get it. This is definitely one where a lot of people wanted them to try and get a quarterback. I like just building up the roster, seeing what Jimmy G can do, and then go from there next year and reevaluate.
Yep. 100%.
All right, pick 8.
This is where it gets fun right here.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is me hoping, me wanting, or, they just spent a lower round draft pick last year getting a guy that worked out pretty good, the back out of BYU, Tyler Algier. But, pick 8, Atlanta Falcons, Bijan Robinson. You add him to the last 3 years, they've taken a skilled guy in the first 10 picks. It started with Pitts at 4. Last year it was, Drake London, and now we're giving Bijan Robinson. And I'll tell you, that's a great thing to give Desmond Ridder, a quarterback that if you get success out of Ridder over the next few years, they're going to be able to build that roster up, not worry about a huge contract for a quarterback that they selected in the 3rd round. I like the pick. I don't think they're really going to go with the pick, but I certainly would if I were in their position. What do you think, Coach?
This is a prime example of best player available, right? Versus maybe necessarily what we think the NFL GM might actually do. But look, I'm a big Bijan Robinson guy. Everybody knows that. But, you fall into an Arthur Smith system. He's certainly proven he loves the run game. And I think with Bijan Robinson, you get a lot more explosiveness than you're getting with Tyler Algier. So I think this is, if you're going to go that route, and now you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Drake London, you've got Brian Robinson, right? You can figure out kind of what you're going to do offensively and what that's going to look like. But I love Bijan Robinson, and I think from a fantasy standpoint, it's a pretty good landing spot. As much as I don't think that's where he lands, and you said the same thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta goes Bijan Robinson right here.
We can hope, and it would be fun, and it would break the hearts out of It's so funny, all these teams talking about we're not taking a running back in the 1st round. As soon as Bijan Robinson's off the board, there are going to be 31 other teams going, God, we should have pulled the trigger if we had the opportunity. But let's move on. Let's move on to the team that made the trade with Carolina. So they went from 1 down to pick 9, and that's the Chicago Bears. Who do you like? Who do you think they're getting? And yes, real quick, Alex, yards per. I'll tell you guys, I love the hat, but more importantly, I love the site. I love what Alex is doing there. If you have not dived into the rookie fantasy football players that you'll want to draft here in the upcoming spring and then into the summer, go to the Yards Per Twitter account. Go to Alex's Twitter account, and you can find a whole bunch of rookie profiles. He does a great job breaking them down, talking about why he thinks they're going to be good. Give him a good look, because I'll tell you, it's always better to go into a rookie draft prepared. All right, Coach, who are we doing at pick 9, or what are we doing at pick 9?
So pick 9, this is one where I think you can, people talk about, they brought Nate Davis in at guard. They talk about, what can the Bears do to give Justin Fields some protection? You brought in DJ Moore, you have Chase Claypool, you have Darnell Mooney, you have Cole Kmet, you've got Justin Fields, who could have broken the NFL record for rushing yards for a quarterback last year, and they pulled him back late in the season because of injury. But I just think you have to go with the best offensive lineman in this draft, and that to me is Peter Skoronski. He probably will start at right tackle next year, but he has the ability. I think he's a Pro Bowl tackle. I mean, people talk about the 33-inch arms. The last time there was a Pro Bowler with 33-inch arms or less, the tackle position was Donald Penn. And that's how far back that goes. But there's exceptions to every rule. There's outliers that happen, and I think that Peter Skoronski is the guy you have to take. Now, if he ends up playing guard, next year, or you think your tackles are showing enough, look, there's a lot of time left. They could go tackle later on in the draft, but I think Peter Skoronski in this position, you take the best offensive lineman possible for Justin Fields in this offense. So
I like it, and I like the pick. I kind of think they might go tackle. I like Paris Johnson possibly going there, but I think this is the right pick no matter what. And that meaning you got to get yourself an offensive line. You got to help Justin Fields out. Just, if nothing more, to find out if you need to worry about making another quarterback selection in the next couple of years. But I don't think they do. I think they just need to let him continue to develop and keep putting people around him like they've done in this offseason. Getting DJ Moore and now an offensive lineman picking the first 10 picks in the draft isn't going to do anything more, or isn't going to do anything other than help and benefit Justin Fields. All right, let's move on to pick 10. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. These guys are in a great position because they don't have a lot of needs. They have you said it all last year. This might be the best roster in the NFL, and they proved it with their Super Bowl run, and they proved it with, they were just very dominant throughout the entire year. And I think they just if you look at what they like to do in the first round, and that is build up the lines. And I believe they're going to go on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to take Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, defensive end. Everyone likes to talk about how he hasn't started a game since his high school career, and that has a lot to do with the way Iowa runs their program. They're a senior dominant program. But when he was on the field, he's just a very clean player. I think he's going to be an NFL player for the next 10 to 12 years. I like Lucas Van Ness for Philadelphia.
And hey, look, this is what Philly likes to do, right? Between Brandon Graham and that that front four, right? They like to put pressure on the quarterback with their front four, allow people to play in space behind it. And if they can do that and you can drop in coverage, you can make some things happen. And look, they're not looking for a guy to come in and play, every snap. They're looking for a rotational guys right now. They've got guys that aren't ready to retire yet. They're trying to make another run, but they're getting a little bit longer on the tooth. And so you bring in a guy like Lucas Van Ness that can be a part of a rotation, can learn from these guys that have a lot of great experience and have Super Bowl experience. They've won one and they've been to a second one in the last, since 2017. So I think it's a great situation for Lucas Van Ness. I think this is a great pick for Philadelphia right here. I think if Bijan Robinson was available right there, that's where I go. But if he's not, then hey, you shore up. Everybody knows Philadelphia likes to build inside out. They draft offensive linemen and D linemen every year, and they just rebuild and they just retool, I should say. I think it's a great pick for Lucas Van Ness right there.
All right, pick 11, Tennessee Titans. What do you see them doing, Coach?
Man, so many ways to go here. So this is a pick I went back and forth on. I think we went through this mock 3 or 4 times before we finally were like, hey, that's it. We're just going to keep it where it's at. There's no such thing as a perfect draft. But I think if you're Tennessee, it makes a lot of sense to go JSN to pair with Treylon Burks and give Ryan Tannehill more weapons and to kind of build that receiving core down the road. And what happens with Derrick Henry and how that plays out. Do they change schematically? But look, right now, as long as Vrabel is the head coach there and Derrick Henry's still in Tennessee, they're going to try to pound the rock. So to me, you got to go offensive line here. I go Paris Johnson, who between him and Broderick Jones, I'm probably a little bit higher on Broderick Jones' upside, like Tyree Wilson compared to Will Anderson. I think Tyree has a little bit more upside if he hits his potential than Will Anderson. Same thing with Paris Johnson, I think, here versus Broderick Jones. I think Broderick Jones has more upside, but Paris Johnson is a safer pick. And I think in Tennessee, you need that offensive tackle right now. So for me, it's Paris Johnson out of Ohio State right at the tackle position.
I like the pick. I like the pick because we always talk about, building, just much like we just talked about with Philadelphia. You got to always get people on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And he is going to be a guy that is plug and play. And the great thing about tackles is they're plug and play, and they're there for a hell of a long time.
Well, I was just going to say to your point too, and I want to make this point because people will say that hear this will say, "Hey, just signed Andre Dillard from Philly and he got him a nice contract." Andre Dillard somehow got paid for a guy that didn't play it wasn't this guy didn't start 17 games and play every snap. He was a rotational guy. But you sign him to a contract at left tackle. Look, you're going to bump him to right tackle. He's played both. You're going to put the guy you just drafted, Paris Johnson, at left tackle, and you're going to go from there. And look, now you've got your tackle situation figured out, and you move forward. So it makes a lot of sense for me for Tennessee to go that route. As much as JSN, Treylon Burks is exciting, I think you're trying to build a football roster not just for this year, but for the next 10 years. And so you've got to get your left tackle shored up.
That brings us to pick 12, and a lot of people will be critical of the Houston Texans if they walk away from the second pick without a quarterback. But if the fall of CJ Stroud really does happen, and like it did in our own draft, I'll tell you what, if they're sitting there at pick 12 and CJ Stroud is sitting right there in front of them, they're going to be thrilled. So Houston Texans, CJ Stroud, quarterback out at Ohio State. Great opportunity for him to go in there. They've already worked. I mean, they just added a great defensive player for them. And now they get their quarterback of the future. Everyone talks about his size, 6'3", 214 pounds. He doesn't do the running that you see from Justin Fields, another Ohio State quarterback, but his accuracy, his ability to throw the ball deep on the outside of the numbers, he's a great thrower of the football. So Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, here's my C.J. Stroud is you can make a very, very strong argument as C.J. Stroud as a QB1. And again, if you look at Bryce Young, the durability, the size, the frame, if you want to go that route, C.J. Stroud to me becomes your QB1. And I've talked about that all offseason. I know that the guys over at Randy Hall, we just put him up, man. Appreciate the shout out, appreciate the love. Randy Hall and Christian Williams. I listen to your guys' podcast all the time over there at the
Cut. Got it started.
Yeah, those guys do an outstanding job, man. So I want to give those guys a shout out because we certainly appreciate those guys a ton. But yeah, I think CJ Stroud here, if he's going to drop to 12 and you go, I think Houston going defense, the second pick and grabbing Tyree Wilson. I don't hate that play. And then you come back, and if you can get that quarterback at 12 and get CJ Stroud, who might have been your second best quarterback on the board to begin with, then I can certainly see him go in this direction. I'm a CJ Stroud guy. Ohio State runs a pro-style offense out there with Ryan Day. So he understands full field reads as well. So he can make every throw. It's extreme. You saw it in the workouts, and people talk about the combine and it's the Olympics in shorts, whatever the phrase is that people use. But look, there's reasons why they do it. It's extremely important. It's not just about the measure. It's about, hey, taking a guy that has all eyes on him. He's got to throw on time. He's got to throw in rhythm. He's got to throw accurately. You're supposed to complete 100% of those passes, right? Because you're in shorts. We call that Skelly. 7-on-7, right? Or routes on air, we used to call it. If you're not completing everything and routes on air, then what are we doing, right? It's frustrating as a coach, especially as an offensive coordinator. But CJ Stroud just looked absolutely outstanding. Everything that you heard about him and his accuracy was on point and on display, during the NFL Combine. So I love the pick for Houston right here, especially if he falls to 12. You have to go CJ Stroud here.
Let's move on. Pick 13. They just got the pick a few days ago. They finally got the Aaron Rodgers trade to New York Jets done. Part of the deal was that Green Bay moves up from 15. Now they're selecting 13. So with the 13th pick, who are the Green Bay Packers selecting?
So when they were at 15, right? And I think we all knew Aaron Rodgers was gone. It was Jordan Love's season. We all kind of knew how that was going to play out, whether it was going to be reported or not. But I felt like tight end made a lot of sense. I thought Michael Mayer made a lot of sense. I know a lot of people are out there lobbying for Dalton Kincaid, but Green Bay likes to run that zone scheme, and Green Bay likes to have a tight end that's involved in the run game. And so it's easy to go tight end here, I think, at 15. But I think at 13, you move up a couple of spots, and you look at who they have. Alan Lazard is now with the New York Jets. You've got Christian Watson. You have Samori Toure. It's not as exciting as a receiving core, and I think it's one of those things for Green Bay. You go, hey, not only do we get some picks to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. We came out really well. He plays 65% or more of the snaps. That turns into a 1. Now you take that and you say, hey, I picked 13. I'm going to do what Aaron Rodgers always wanted us to do, and I'm going to go with a receiver, Jackson Smith and Jigba at 13, that complements Christian Watson really well, complements what they can do with Aaron Jones in the passing game. They've got to figure out the tight end position, but this is a deep tight end class. I think the total yards between Josiah DeGore and the rest of the tight ends on that team right now is about 440 yards total between the 3 tight ends on the roster. But look, you can come back later in the second round. You can grab your tight end at pick 42. You just got from the Jets, or pick 45. So I think here you take Jackson Smith and Jigba and you move forward. You do everything you can to make it as easy as possible for Jordan Love.
As someone who's got a lot of teams with Jordan Love on it, I love the pick. As someone who's not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers, I love the pick even more for the reason that you said. Just say, hey,
absolutely,
here you go. Here's your receiver. Get the hell out of here. Let's move on. We can talk about that saga forever. Pick 14, New England Patriots. I am on the clock. Everyone talked about all the struggles Mac Jones had last year, and a lot of it had to do with that they didn't protect him very well last year. And they didn't just lose Tom Brady. They lost a lot when the transition went from the Brady era to where we are now. And they got to rebuild those lines. So I'm going Broderick Jones, offensive tackle, Georgia, stud athlete, former high school basketball player. I like him. I think he's going to be a great fit for what they do. And I just think it's a smart Bill Belichick type of pick.
I think he's the best tackle in terms of upside in this draft. I think Paris Johnson, again, is a safe pick, but I love Broderick Jones. I love what he brings to the table. I love his athleticism. I think he's a guy that's got everything you read and hear from Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks and the first pick with Rick Spielman and all those guys and some of the other guys that break these guys down. I know Christian Williams is a big fan of his too, but Broderick Jones, this is your pick. You've got to have protection. You got to get your offensive tackle for the future, and they're not guys that fall off trees. This is a draft that's pretty deep at that position, but you get an opportunity at the 14th pick to solidify your offensive line. I think you take advantage of that opportunity. So I love this pick.
Pick 15. Now they're the ones who had to move down a couple spots for acquiring Aaron Rodgers. New York Jets are on the clock, and this is your selection, Coach.
So now we talk about offensive tackles, right? And I still think Peter Skoronski is a Pro Bowl potential at tackle, especially if he's right tackle, but he's an all-pro guard. I think he's really an interior guy. And I bring that up because Darnell Wright is that guy I think that is the best right tackle in this draft, a guy that we know is probably going to play the right tackle position. There's so much talk about left tackles and how important they are, the blind side of a right-handed quarterback. But the reality is most of these NFL defenses are scheme. They're moving guys around. You could have just as good of a pass rusher that the right tackle is facing as the left tackle is facing. I mean, that's part of the game now and the part of the chess that these teams play. So I think Darnell Wright, an offensive tackle out of Tennessee, is the pick here for the Jets. And I think Aaron Rodgers would be okay with that.
I think he would be very okay with that. Did you see, before we leave the saga, but he did come out and say today that this is not going to be a one-year deal for Aaron. He plans on being there for the foreseeable future. Which
you hear the comment that he made about Zach Wilson?
I did not. I would love to hear it though.
I'm trying to paraphrase. I'm probably not going to get it perfect, but Zach Wilson made the comment about
making
whatever veteran quarterback they bring in, I'm going to make it hell for him. Well, Aaron Rodgers said something to the effect of, hey, I'm going to go out and play really well, and I'm going to make you the best bench quarterback you can be, or something about being off the field. Right. So it was a fun banter between, and I'm probably way off on the exact quote, but it was something to that effect, and I thought it was classic Aaron Rodgers.
There you go. Well, hey, let's move on to pick 16, Washington Commanders. I always found it interesting that they want to go the Sam Howell direction.
Me too.
They never even discussed moving up. They seem to be kind of taking the San Francisco 49er approach and just seeing if they can get somebody cheap and see how that works. So if they're not going to go cornerback, they're going quarterback. They're going to go cornerback, and that's Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. You talk about a physical corner. Have you ever seen this guy reroute people off the line of scrimmage? I mean, this guy, he's someone who I think is going to be very fun to watch every Sunday. I think he's going to fit very, very nicely into that defense.
Well, his dad was pretty good at football too.
He
So
was.
talk
He
about
was.
the tree. Yeah. So hey, I think Joey Porter, 6'2", 193. He gives you the size, he gives you the length. He's physical. He can reroute guys at the top. I always talk about as a wide receiver coach. What makes a wide receiver so great is not just the release and the stem and how he sets DBs up. Their ability to win at the top end of a route, meaning a corner is sitting on your route and your ability to use hands and position to win route side space. And I think Joey Porter's type of guy that's very, very good at the top end of routes and rerouting wide receivers. So I like this pick for Washington. I think people have to understand if you just joined us, but Anthony Richard's still available. But again, they've talked about Sam Howell. They've talked about wanting to give him an opportunity. I'm not a massive Sam Howell guy. I don't hate the guy either. I'm interested to see what he can do if he, in fact, is the guy for this year for him. I don't see him as a franchise quarterback. But can he be serviceable? I love Joey Porter here. I think he's my corner 3. Corner 4. There's another guy we haven't drafted yet. I've got above him, but I like the Joey Porter pick.
Well, I think we might be going on a cornerback run here. So why don't we go to pick 17 with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
So here's my guy. Here's my corner 3. We talk about Christian Gonzalez and I can't believe I can't remember his name right now. Christian Gonzalez and what was the other?
Devin Witherspoon.
Jesus, I'm a massive Devin Witherspoon guy, and I forgot his name. I think Deonte Banks to me is the corner 3. I love him, and I actually like Joey Porter better for Pittsburgh than I did. I think he's more of a, I shouldn't say more of a Mike Tomlin guy, but I know Mike Tomlin likes the size that he brings to the table. But Deion Banks, another one of those guys, 6'1", 197, 4.35 speed, 42-inch vertical, 11.4 broad jump. All of those are top 3 scores for corners this year at the NFL Combine. I think he's tough as nails. He's scheme versatile. It doesn't matter if he's off the ball, if he's playing press coverage, if he's sitting on routes, which is more of a 5-yard cushion, and instead of bailing, you kind of sit and try to redirect the receiver. I think he can do all 3 of those things. I think he can do them at a high level. So I think Deonte Banks fits with what they're trying to do in Pittsburgh, what Mike Tomlin does with that defense. Man, this is a great fit.
I like it.
We can like it because we're making the picks, but I think it's a great pick.
Well, that was your pick. So let's move on to my pick, and that's for the Detroit Lions. This pick was a little difficult for me because of
this is an interesting one. I like it.
The Jameson Williams news of last week. He's out the first 6 games. They certainly can use another pass catcher. So I was thinking receiver there for a bit, but I'm sticking on the defensive side of the ball, and that's Detroit Lions selecting Kalijah Kancey, defensive tackle out of the University of Pittsburgh. He's kind of a smaller defensive tackle, almost in the all-world. God, now you talk about forgetting names. Who's the most impressive defensive player at Los Angeles Rams?
Aaron Donald.
Aaron Donald.
He doesn't have the arm length either. Yeah, there's some similarities there.
Yeah. And Kancey's 2 years, 14 and a half sacks from the inside. He's just physical. He seems like he's a Dan Campbell type of guy, and I think that they really just want to focus on defense in the first round.
So we talked about this earlier with Lucas Van Ness going out of Iowa, going to Philadelphia. Same type of situation with Kalijah Kancey. He doesn't have to play. He's not an every down guy. He can be rotational. He can learn from these guys in the first year with what they're doing defensively with Dan Campbell over there in Detroit. But I love it. So now you've gotten Devin Witherspoon. We took at 6. Now you take Kalijah Kancey. You have what they've done in free agency to add to that defensive group. That was a pain point last year for them. Is hey, we've got to be better defensively. I mean, we feel like offensively we can compete with anybody. So now you take another position of need at the defensive tackle position, and Kalijah Kancey becomes a great complement to that defense. So I think it's a great pick there. We talked about. I joked around with you when you made the pick, and I think we were texting back. Oh no, we did this on a call last night, and I loved it. I was a little shocked. I didn't know you were going to go there, but I loved it. So I was like, okay, all right, I get it.
All right, let's move on to pick 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like this pick that you selected. Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, so you've been following the draft. Anthony Richardson has not been selected yet, and I think this is a great opportunity. Look, it's not Baker Mayfield's not the guy. I think we've seen that play out in Cleveland. We've seen it play out in Carolina. I think we're starting to see some of those attitudes and some of that ego that Mayfield has. He's not. I don't think he's the guy to lead your franchise as you are in a rebuild mode, moving on from Tom Brady. Mike Evans is certainly getting a little longer in the tooth. You moved on from in the running back position. So I think for me, it's like, hey, let's use Anthony Richardson. We've got Baker Mayfield as a bridge gap. Let's bring in Anthony Richardson. Let's start to figure out how we can use him in sub packages. We can use him in the red zone. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense. You get him a year to sit without being the QB1, but you can use him again in sub packages. He's 6'4", 245, runs a 4.43 at the combine. He's got a 40.5-inch vertical. He's got untapped potential. And I think people want to talk about the inaccuracies, but I think you have to go back and look at the Florida offense. It's not a great offense. It's not. We talked about this last year with Dameon Pierce, how we thought at the NFL level he could be successful. He wasn't utilized properly in Florida. I think you say the same thing about Anthony Richardson. Again, you're chasing ceiling at the 19th overall pick. I'm okay taking a quarterback here with tremendous upside. It's not Kyle Trask. It's not Baker Mayfield. I can tell you that. So get your guy.
When you made the selection, we were on the phone. I was real disappointed because I was hoping he was going to slide down one more spot. But you said it best. I believe Mayfield only signed a 1-year contract. So he's a perfect stopgap. You can find out, I guess, whatever we're going to find out about Kyle Trask, but just put him in the offense, let him sit there for a year and figure it all out. And I love the pick. But let's move on to pick 20, Seattle Seahawks. Wait, real quick, Fantasy Garage wants to know, do we really think he's going to last to 19? Everything, we always talk about tea leaves.
Great question.
We don't know. But just from what we're hearing or what we read or it could happen. You see Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft today came out. His last one actually has Anthony Richardson sliding all the way down to pick 20. So obviously he thinks it can happen. I guess that's what we're going to find out tomorrow, but it's sure fun to think about. Yeah, go ahead, Coach.
No, I was just saying, my take on that. First of all, great question. Thank you for listening in on it and getting involved. But I think you have to look at, if you take a quarterback in the top 5 or 6 picks and you miss, you can set your franchise back, 5 to 10 years. I think that's the reality of the situation. So if there's question marks about Anthony Richardson and you take him at 19, I think you're okay there. I think it's a little bit different deal. You're not taking him in the top 5. And I think you have an opportunity to tap into that upside. Do I think he's going to be there at 19? I don't. Based off the film that I've watched and doing some research on it, listening to people that I trust in this space that are actually scouts at the NFL level, no, I don't. But look, if he is, and you're Tampa Bay and you're sitting there, I think you have to make that pick.
Well, let's move on to pick 20. This is a team that I thought could take Anthony if he was there, but instead they help out their quarterback, and that is by selecting wide receiver Zay Flowers out of Boston College. Talk about that guy that's really climbed up the charts over the last few months. This guy, you talked about him before when you were talking about possible landing spots for players. I love the guy. I think he can help them out immensely. You got Tyler Lockett kind of getting up there a little bit in age. Match him up with DK. I think it'd be a great pick for Seattle.
Yeah, Zay Flowers, being a guy that's wide receiver coach, I love what he does as a route runner. And I think he's just scratching the surface coming out of Boston College. I think the upside for him is tremendous. I think if you get in the right situation, the right offense, and they can utilize his versatility, I think he's a great fit at the NFL level. I love how he stems routes. I love his ability to get in and out of cuts without selling the route that I'm running. He does a great job with that. I think he's a technician. I think he's only going to get better there. But huge Zay Flowers guy. He's my wide receiver too. I have him over Jordan Addison. So I think, and of course, right behind, JSN. So I love this pick here for Seattle. I think it's a great compliment to what you have with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. You kind of hit on that. They've got a 3-headed monster. I tweeted this out last week. You've got Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson, and can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head. But you've got three tight ends out there last year combined.
Noah Fant,
Jesus, right? That probably thought like, great, I'm going to go over to Seattle and I'm losing Russell Wilson, right? I thought I was going to get Russell Wilson in Denver. Right. But, those three guys produce at a very, very high level. And now you add another weapon in Zay Flowers, and then you got Kenneth Walker in the backfield and Geno Smith doing what he's doing. So Zay Flowers is a great compliment to what they've got going on there. So
How
of all
happy
the picks in this draft, that's one of my favorite picks right there. But you
got Jalen Carter.
Yes, correct. Yes.
So yeah, Seattle is in such a great position to just. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's going to be a battle for that NFC West with them and San Francisco, and who knows if Los Angeles is going to be able to get back, and who knows if Arizona is going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So let's move on to pick 21. You're up. You just mentioned the guy, so why don't you tell us who they select here?
Yeah, so you sniped me with Zay Flowers, but I think with the Chargers, if you look at who they've got, Gerald Everett, and they've got a decent tight end group, there's an argument that can be made to go tight end here. You've got the talent of Justin Herbert. We'll see where they go with the running back position. But long story short, I think you've got to get another pass catcher. I think you've got to get Keenan Allen's getting long in the tooth. Mike Williams is going to be Mike Williams. He is who he is. We kind of know at this point he's played enough years in the league. He's a decent complementary piece, but you can get Jordan Addison that can win at all three levels. Inside, he can play inside. He can play outside. He attacks all three levels of the field. I think he's good coming out. He was a return guy in his background, so he's slippery in open space. So I think he's a good fit for what the Chargers are trying to do here from a schematic standpoint. And I think it's a good pick, and it's where I'd go. I still would have loved to see Zay Flowers here, but I'm okay if Jordan Addison is still there. I'm getting those guys. Those are my 1 and 2 on the wide receiver board. So I'm trying to attack that position. Now, if those two guys are gone, I'm going tight end here. Because Gerald Everett's getting a little bit older, and I'm not a big fan of Donald Parham outside of a little bit of what he can do in the red zone. But, I'd probably go tight end there, but I'll go Jordan Addison here.
I love that pick. I think it gives Herbert some youth. I mean, he's got Jordan Palmer, who hasn't been able to. I mean, Jordan Palmer flashed at times last year, but he's not. I don't think he's the same Jordan as Jordan Addison. So I love
Josh Palmer. I got you.
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Jordan Palmer's a hell of a quarterback coach, though. Let's go.
Josh Palmer, thank you very much.
I got you.
Baltimore Ravens. I'm on the pick 22. First and foremost, when we were doing this, I'm looking at my list. I'm going, how did nobody select this guy? And
yeah.
when I looked at it, I felt like, this is a perfect.
We let this guy slip for sure.
Perfect Baltimore Raven, and that's edge rusher out of Georgia, Nolan Smith. I think he just fits the mold. I think he's the type of player we've seen them draft before. Terrell Suggs. I mean, he's not as big as Terrell, but just an athletic guy who's going to be a stalwart for that defense for the years to come.
Yeah, I don't know how. This is one of those deals where I probably should have texted you afterwards. How do we let Nolan Smith slip this far? But hey, the reality is there are going to be guys that slip we don't expect. There's going to be guys that go higher than we expected. So this is just one of those situations where Nolan Smith slipped. I'm a big Nolan Smith fan. 6'2", 238. He's explosive. He's great with his hands. He's great at the point of attack. He can be relevant in the run game. Man, I still can't believe he's there, and I can't believe that the Baltimore Ravens, who've always been historically great defenses, gets a guy like Nolan Smith this late in the draft to kind of continue that trend. So I think if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan and if you're a defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens, I think you love this situation because what's their whole entire game plan, right? Run the football, play good defense, flip field position, create turnovers, and let's go try to win a Super Bowl. So I think this is I don't think you could have gotten any better pick here at 22.
I do think though that they would rather get a Flowers or rather get.
They need a receiver. Yeah,
I think but I'm looking at the three guys that have gone. I think they're going to go defense if that's the case. Come tomorrow night. Pick 23. You're up. Minnesota Vikings.
So this was tough. I mean, I struggled with this pick. I went back and forth. We were on the phone last night on this one, but this is another guy I think probably slipped a little bit further than he should have. Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama. He's very toolsy. He replaces, in my opinion, Cameron Bynum at the free safety position. He's great in single high looks. Cameron Bynum gave up a 115.4 passer rating last season opposite, and he plays opposite Harrison Smith. I think he's great as a strong safety, but he's getting a little bit older there too. But their pass defense ranked 31st in yards allowed at over 4,500 yards last year. right? If you're going to compete and you're going to try to get to the playoffs, you're going to try to make a run, you've got to be able to stop people in the run game, and you got to be able to stop people in the fourth quarter or in situations where they're trying to come from behind. And I think you've got to find a stopgap there. I think Brian Branch creates that. He's also a guy that's very versatile and can play a corner, a slot corner if he has to. So I love the versatility of Brian Branch. For me, for him still being there at 23, I think you take him in a defense that needs help in the passing game.
I love the pick. I think he's going to be. They need that type of player on the defensive side of the ball. They're getting a little bit older back there, and we're moving to Minnesota in 4 years. My kids are Minnesota Viking fans, so I love the pick, and I know both my boys will be very happy if they can walk out of the draft with that guy.
There you go.
Moving on, pick 24, Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they get some help, get some more help, even though they just decided to give Evan Ingram some more money. I like pick 24, Jacksonville Jaguars, selecting Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Heading into the fall of 2022, his name, along with Bijan Robinson, is a guy that a lot of fantasy guys were talking about keeping an eye on, wanting to really watch this, feeling like he's going to be the type of player that you're going to want to select early in rookie drafts in 2023. He's a true Y type of tight end. He's going to be at the end of the line of scrimmage. And man, I like him. I think he's going to be a great fit. It gives you a real end zone presence for Trevor Lawrence. So that's my selection, Michael Mayer, tight end, Notre Dame.
Yeah, and hey, look, if you look at, Evan Ingram last year, 39.5% of his snaps, he had 228 snaps in the slot, and he kind of split 36% in line, and of course he was out wide. So he was a guy that moved around quite a bit, more what I would call an H-back type of or a Y tight end. That we have different terms for that. Some Y tight ends are blockers, some Y tight ends based on where you learned and where you're at, where guys that played in the slot. For me, a Y was a guy that was a slot guy, but Evan Ingram, he's a good compliment to him. Of course, we know how good of a year he had last year, and I think that I've got a good buddy of mine that was a wide receiver coach there last year. This is a very interesting pick. I like it because he's a guy that can play inline. He complements what Evan Ingram does. I think you get a little more opportunities to run 12 personnel with Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, right, and Christian Kirk. So you get Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, and then you get Michael Mayer, in that offense, and with the ability of Travis Etienne in the backfield. That's an exciting offense for me for Trevor Lawrence next year.
Well, they're an exciting team. I mean, that run that they made, I'm looking for – did any coach have a bigger influence on his team than Doug Peterson last year?
No. What a great – it never made sense to me when Philly moved on, but of course that's worked out for Philly, right? But yeah, Doug Peterson's always been a guy that's been a great coach, especially from an offensive standpoint. So it's not surprising to me that, if they go this route, God dang, man, I love it. Talk about going from, I'm not even going to mention his name because it annoys the crap out of me, to go from that experiment with Trevor Lawrence in his rookie year to Doug Peterson in year 2, and just see how much better Trevor Lawrence was with a coach that actually understood the NFL game. And now you add another piece of the puzzle with Michael Mayer there. So that's a great pick.
Let's move on. Pick 25, New York Giants. I know if you're a Giants fan, you're sure hoping you're taking a receiver here.
I tell you what, I'm excited for this pick. I'm a little surprised, and I'm not the biggest. I've got him as my wide receiver 4. I'm not as big on him as some others are, and I can make an argument for wide receiver 5 or 6. I'm also big on Marvin Mims. But I think in this situation, you got a bunch of slot receivers in New York, right? You don't have that big-bodied guy. They tried out the Kenny Galladay experience. We know how that played out. Now you bring in Quentin Johnston out of TCU. He can be alligator arms at sometimes. He's not. You think based on his size, he's a great contested catch guy, but he's really not. But those are skills. That's a mental thing as a wide receiver coach. Like, you have to have that mentality of, that football is mine. I don't care where it's thrown. I don't care where the DB is at. I'm going to do everything I can to scratch and claw to make a catch. You just got to learn that toughness at the catch point. But I think you get your big body wide receiver here in Quentin Johnston. You create a situation where you get a red zone guy and a guy that can take the top off. He's a speed guy at 6'3", 208. So I think for the next evolution for Daniel Jones, with Saquon Barkley staying healthy and what they've done there last year offensively, now you can be a little more open in the passing game with Daniel Jones. You've got Quentin Johnston. out of the mix. They're deep at wide receiver in terms of, but they're all the same type of guy,
Right.
right? So now you add that Quentin Johnston guy that gives you a little bit something different, opens up that underneath space.
I like it. I like it. And I like him. And it's so funny. I mean, you look at the Michigan game heading up to the national championship game, that big play he made late. He's got, for a big guy, he's got ability to separate. I'm a fan, and I don't know why people kind of got a little cold on him, but I guess we'll find out. Let's move on. Pick 26, your Dallas Cowboys. How I ended up getting.
Wait, hold on a second. How did we end up with you getting to pick the Dallas Cowboys pick?
You said you wanted.
How did that happen?
It just odd and even is all it ended up being.
That's right.
And I just kind of put my hat in Stephen. I kind of just put Stephen Jones, and I got to say, what you guys have done in the draft over the last 5 to 7, 8 years has been pretty impressive. And as much as everyone used to talk about them just trying to get, the fun pick. Like if they were at pick 8 years ago, they're taking Bijan all day long. If they're going to take chances on guys, and they've kind of stopped doing that, and they're doing a much better job with first round selections. But I'm going pick 26, Dallas Cowboys, Miles Murphy out of Clemson. Their defense last year was stout, and you would know everything about that, obviously. But with that being said, they always got to reload, and they're the type of team that doesn't take time away from trying to continue to have a whole bunch of guys that they can rotate up front. So that's why I'm going Miles Murphy.
No, and I'll keep this as quick as I can as a Cowboys fan. But first of all, Dan Quinn turning down the opportunity to be a head coach, to come back and run it back, tells me everything I need to know. It makes me fall in love with him as a coach even more, because if you can give him a guy like Miles Murphy, which now gives you Miles Murphy, DeMarcus Lawrence, and now you have the ability to take Micah Parsons, and he doesn't have to be a guy that plays DN on every snap. He can play in space. You can play him at linebacker. He can attack the A gap. He can attack the B gap. He can play DN in rotation. You can move him all over the field, and that guy can play sideline to sideline. He can play vertically. He can play in the run game. You can play Micah Parsons anywhere you want. So based on – and look, I would have loved to have gotten a Michael Mayer right here. He's off the board. I would have loved to have gone maybe an Osiris Torrance right here, but Miles Murphy dropping to 26, to me, Brett, you nailed it, because if the guys that are available, this is the guy I want to add to a Dan Quinn defense. So this is super exciting for me as a Cowboys fan, based on how the board fell. If this is who we end up with based on the guys that are already gone, I'll take this all day long.
Well, who are the Buffalo Bills are going to take? Because that's who you are selecting for now at pick 27.
Yeah, so Dan, who, if you ever get a chance to listen to this, from Fantasy Gods, he's a massive Buffalo Bills fan. And, we talk about wanting to get wide receivers here. I think at this point, the wide receivers I would like are off the board. So I'm going to go with Osiris Torrance, who I think can be a mauler, especially in a power run game. But I love the upside, and this is tough because Steve Avila, or is it Osiris Torrance? I think the best tackles, in my opinion, are off the board. So if I'm going best player available to solidify that offensive line and keep Josh Allen upright and they can help out in the run game, to me, you take the 6'5", 330-pound dude here, and you take Osiris Torrance.
I like it. I mean, they need it because they struggled up front last year a little bit.
It's not a sexy pick, but I think it's the right pick based on the board.
Well, yeah, you talked about it because the receivers that you'd want to select at this spot, they're not there, and you don't want to reach. And everyone talks about the top 4 or 5 receivers. Everyone's talking about this being kind of a down year anyways for receivers. So much better select the better player than simply select a guy that you hope can help out Stephon Diggs. All right, moving on. Pick 28. And
I love this pick.
You talk about the board following perfect. We felt like it fell pretty nice for Baltimore with them being able to get Nolan. And now we're moving on. Pick 28, Cincinnati Bengals, Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah. If you saw the USC game last year, did you see the game?
I did.
Okay. Did you see what Dalton Kincaid did? He had over 200 yards. I mean, the guy he's one of the most impressive route runners I've seen from a tight end in a while. I know Daniel Jeremiah is really high on him. I know the last time I was interested in a tight end from playing for Cincinnati Bengals was good old Tyler Eifert.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting there at the back end of a rookie draft and I've got Dalton Kincaid staring at me, in that offense, I think he's perfect. And I think Cincinnati would be thrilled to be able to pick up Dalton Kincaid this late in the draft.
I mean, hey, look, your other options are Irv Smith Jr., who was a tight end 43 last year. Yes, he's still young, but it didn't pan out in Minnesota. And then you see T.J. Hawkinson go to Minnesota and have the second half of the season he had, which tells me Irv Smith is not that guy. Then you go to their tight end 2, which is tight end 109 last year, which is Devin Asiasi, who New England drafted. That didn't pan out. He's a guy that lines up 88% of the time in line. He's involved in the run game, pass block. So if you're going to get a guy right here at this spot and you're going to take the tight end, which I think adds to – you want to talk about what Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can do from a intermediate to long, deep part of the fields. You take a Dalton Kincaid and let him work underneath. And this is not a guy that is Dalton Schultz. It just works the underneath game, get to the first down, get the sticks. He can stretch a seam vertically. So you've now created with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and now Dalton Kincaid. Oh, that Cincinnati offense. This is – to me, it's exciting because it's like circa, Joe Burrow when he won the national championship and threw for 60 touchdowns that year. You're setting him up offensively to have a package you can put together where you can use Devin Asiasi as your inline blocker if you want to go 12 personnel. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, right? And you can then have Dalton Cade playing in the slot in a 3-by-1 set. Oh, it's exciting as an offensive coordinator to go, man, the things I can do in this offense right now.
For me, it's exciting for a fantasy manager.
I don't think he gets to 28, but man, if he does, this is the perfect pick.
Well, we didn't get him there, so let's. So I have hope. All right, let's move on. Pick 29, New Orleans Saints. Who do you got them selecting?
So I'm big on Will McDonald, edge player out of Iowa State. I think he's got all the tools to be long term. He's an explosive athlete. He's got long arms. He's got reach. He's well timed with his hands and his length. He gives you a lot of He pursues, and that tank is always full. We call it gas, which is some give a shit. And this guy has got some give a shit in his tank. That guy's relentless. I love him in what he does in pursuit in the run game, what he can do in terms of being disruptive. So I'm excited. Again, we keep talking about these late picks. We certainly let some defensive guys drop probably a little further than we probably should have. Nolan Smith and, of course, this guy right here with Will McDonald. I think the upside for him, there's guys that have him a little bit sooner. We talk about draft scouts and Daniel Jeremiah and those guys, and there's some guys we see him take. He gets taken in the early second round. But I think Will McDonald has the potential to be an absolute steal at this point for the Saints. You moved on from Marcus Davenport. You replace him with a guy like Will McDonald who's got a high motor. So this is an exciting pick for me. If you're New Orleans Saints, you're trying to build for the future.
Well, there you go. Let's move on to pick 30 because I've been waiting for this one because this is a dream.
I love this one. I was so mad when you made this. If Philadelphia ends up with this draft that we just did, as a Cowboys fan, I hate it. You just put them in the Super Bowl. Well,
let's just get to it. Pick 29, Philadelphia Eagles select running back Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. I've been, I started a Devy League 3 years ago. I had the fifth pick in the Devy League. And with the fifth pick, I didn't know anything about Devy. I didn't know any of the guys. I just went Devy Leagues, top players. What are we doing? And at the 105, they actually had Jahmyr Gibbs. So I went straight to YouTube and turned on his highlights from his freshman year at Georgia Tech, and the guy just pops. He's so fun to watch, and he's just so athletic. And, you talk about the size, 5'9", 199. That's a concern, sure. But for me, it's not a concern because there's so many backs today in this game that can get 12 carries and 6 receptions. You're getting 18 touches. That's kind of what I expect out of him. 10 to 12 carries and 6 to 8 catches in a game. And if you got him in your fantasy lineup or if you got him on your team like the Eagles will in this draft, I'll tell you, you're going to be pretty excited about what you're going to get from him.
I'm gonna tell you this, and this just came to me. So this is right off the top of my head. Jahmyr Gibbs is Tony Pollard with a bigger upside. And what I mean by that is if you look at Tony Pollard when he came out of Memphis, right, the skill set was more complimentary running back. Jahmyr Gibbs has got the ability to be a 3-down back. He's 5'9", 199. Look, to me, if you're 200 is like that clip, right? Like anybody under 200, you might have a little bit of concerns about. Jahmyr Gibbs has proven he can play between the tackles. He can shake you in a phone booth, and meaning in tight corners, he can still has enough wiggle to make things happen. And once he gets to the open field, he's gone. So I love Jahmyr Gibbs. There was a time where I was going to mock him to the Dallas Cowboys, but you got him at 20. You got the pick at 26 with Bijan off the board. If you can get a Jahmyr Gibbs for Philadelphia, and you pair him with Rashad Penny and Kenny Gainwell, again, man, that's a pretty exciting offense you can run there with AJ Brown and what do you call him, a Slim Reaper, right?
Yeah.
Right, with Devontae Smith, and then you got
Yeah.
Dallas Goedert. Now you take Jahmyr Gibbs, what he can do in the passing game, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a better runner between the tackles than people want to give him credit for, because they look at the 5'9", 199 and want to make assumptions. We got to stop making assumptions. Watch the film, watch the tape, look at the measurables. This guy's a player, and if he lands in the right spot in the right scheme, and someone that can utilize his talents properly, he's got big potential, especially in fantasy.
Yes, he does. Hope it happens. But let's move on to the Super Bowl champs. Last pick of the draft, obviously, because Miami Dolphins didn't get a pick because they had to forfeit it, trying to seduce Tom Brady on a boat a few years ago. But so that brings us to pick 31 with the Kansas City Chiefs. Who are the Super Bowl champs, and what direction are they going?
So there's a few different directions you can go here, right? You can look at wide receiver, and I know there's some mock drafts that had Jalen Hyatt going here. You can take a look at Josh Downs. I think with Josh Downs, you're getting a little bit of what you already have with Kadarius Toney and wide receiver they took last year. I don't know why the name is passing me right now, but Sky Moore. You've got kind of those guys already, right? So to me, I'm looking at this offense and I'm saying I don't think this is reaching for Josh Downs. He doesn't fit a role or a need that they have right now. So I'm looking at, hey, let's look at how we can shore up the offensive line. Creed Humphrey's been absolutely outstanding at the center position. They've shored up the interior line. So now let's address the tackle position. And I think here you can take Anton Harris, the tackle out of Oklahoma. He's great at the punch point. He's patient. He's good at resetting his footwork if he gets beat off the initial rep. I think right here you go Anton Harris is sexy, and I think people want to look at offense, especially from a fantasy perspective. If you play fantasy football, you're like, hey, I want to have somebody here that's exciting for the offense, exciting for Patrick Mahomes. He just won a Super Bowl in a year where they're supposed to be rebuilding a wide receiver. As long as they have Travis Kelce and they have complementary pieces, which they brought in, I think you're going to see an uptick with Sky Moore. You're going to see an uptick with MVS and what they have in that offense over there. I'm okay. Go offensive tackle. Your plan is to have Patrick Mahomes for the next 10 to 12 years and to be in competition and competing for a Super Bowl every year. Give him protection, get your tackle, get your guy, and take Anton Harris out of Oklahoma.
I like it. And I like what they did. If you remember their draft from last year, they're in a tough position because they have Patrick Mahomes. Tough position because he takes so much of their cap. But they absolutely killed the draft last year. I think they got 5 rookies starting in the Super Bowl. And now they're selecting somebody who can help out on the offensive line. I like the selection, and good job, Coach. There you go. Our first mock draft is in the books. It's 8:13 on the Pacific Coast. Back to you guys on the east side, it's 11:13, so you're closer. It seems like you're closer to the draft than we are, but I don't know about you, Coach, but I'm not going to be able to think about anything else tomorrow while I'm at work.
I tell you what, man, I was so close, and I'm fortunate enough with my work that I have the ability to kind of do whatever schedule I want. If I want to work from home that day, whatever. But I've got some appointments with customers that are important that I need to have, but I'll be gone by 3:00, and I'll be at the bar with some buddies watching the draft, and I'll certainly have our mock draft, because we took PFF's mock draft simulator. We put it in there just so we'd have a screenshot of it so we could save it and kind of see what does it look like based on how the draft goes. We know there's going to be a lot of trades, going to be a lot of action tomorrow. If you get freaking 5 picks right in the top 20, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But I love the way this draft played out. It was fun to get back on the mic with you, man. Missed you a ton. Glad the family's doing well, and looking forward to as we get closer to the season starting getting back on the mic a lot more often.
Absolutely. Missed you too, Coach. And Definitely. We'll get back going come July. Again, you guys that tuned in and chimed in, thank you so much. Alex, thank you for all your support and giving us an opportunity to use your platform. And everybody else, have a great night and enjoy the draft tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys, man.